I know it's been far too long since I last dabbled in ARK, and there's only so many gaming hours in a week, especially when you aren't a full-time gamer and content creator, but there's a lot to talk about concerning ARK. Studio Wildcard has revealed an updated center release date, and of course, Scorched is live along with Bob's Tall Tales, and we need to check in on both of those. And I'm sorry it's taken me so long to report on this, but when there are 110 pages of financials to sift through, it takes time. But Snail Games has finally released their fourth quarter numbers and year-end reports, and there are some very interesting things happening with that. Welcome back to the channel, it's LtBuzzLitebeer, and in case you haven't yet hit subscribe, please do so. And don't forget to ring that notifications bell to receive my latest upload alerts. And away we go into the land of ARK. Alright, a quick reminder before we start, I always include chapters so you can easily skip around and or repeat sections of this video. Keyword there, repeat, which is going to be extremely useful when we hit the later portions of this one. But we have to start off with the announcement, or re-announcement, I've lost track now, of the center, which has now been dusted off and brought back, according to Wildcard, on June the 3rd. So basically 2 months from today, promising tons of new surprises and a map size 2 times the size of the island, which at this point, the wording is a bit vague, but it feels like the comms team is trying to push the idea that the new center map will be much larger than its ASE form, maybe on par with Ragnarok or even Crystal Isles. I honestly don't know for certain, but if they are mentioning the doubling of the size in comparison to the island, I think that's what they're trying to say here, although I could absolutely be wrong. Let me know how you read this and what is your take on what Wildcard is actually trying to say. Of course, with the remastered map launches coming in hot and heavy, Wildcard is going to have to split its collective developer forces, a fact that they do mention in this week's crunch, with part of the team staying on bug fixes for Scorched, with others already working ahead to Aberration, but the main body of firepower is sticking with the center and that looming June deadline. Now, backtracking into what is currently live for Survival Ascended, and there's a free weekend going on right now, with Steam and PlayStation players also being shown a 20% off purchase discount, while Xbox has already received it free as part of Game Pass as of April the 1st. Now, that whole Game Pass announcement set some people on edge, and I can understand, especially if you were on Xbox and sat through that launch delay only to pay full price when it launched, and here we are, it's been about 4 months, and it has already been packaged into Game Pass, which in itself could be an entire video on how that shift feels way too soon for ARK's evergreen experience, and also what that could mean for how Survival Ascended is performing, overall. But by comparison, ASE took far longer to appear on Game Pass, so I'm with you, and I can understand your frustrations, and perhaps when we jump into those Snail financials a bit later in this video, you'll get a clearer picture. Also, while we're still firmly planted in this week's community crunch, and more specifically the center, which was delayed back in February, mere days before it was set to launch, citing issues with the overall quality of that build, which was being handled by Wildcard's dedicated partners. Anyways, the point I was trying to get to was, now that we've received the June 3rd launch, that's something like 4 months that are going to be ticking by before it releases. My question here is, how bad must that build have looked? I mean, seriously, we've seen some suspect content released in the past, and for Wildcard to postpone the release that long, it must have been a dumpster fire of epic proportions. Quickly taking a look at the Survival Ascended roadmap, and it has again changed, with now Scorched coming a month late, and of course the center will be a month late. All of this is subject to change, by the way, and so if current delay trends continue, Aberration will arrive sometime in August, and so on, taking Fjordur nearly into 2026, with the surprise ASA content currently showing in November 2024, possibly dropping then in December. Tons of questions arise from all of this. Who were these dedicated partners, and will they continue to be involved with ARK development, especially considering how badly they seem to have fumbled the Center remake? Will Wildcard be able to stick to this release roadmap? If so, are we seriously looking at them supporting Survival Ascended development costs deep into 2025, if not 2026? And the 500-pound gorilla in the room, what about ARK 2? Who's working on that one? When will it launch, if ever? I mean, I still question this myself. And finally, what will happen to Survival Ascended if ARK 2 arrives and overlaps with the current ARK game, which I may have an answer to. More on that in a moment. Now, I've been sitting back and monitoring Survival Ascended and Survival Evolved, and with Scorched now live, the player counts are still largely 1-to-1 between the old and new, which, by the way, for ASA is a huge improvement from where it was, sometimes dipping below 10,000 concurrent players on Steam. Still, the parity between these two games, even with remastered Scorched and Bob's Tall Tales, is undeniable. ASA is still sitting at a mixed rating on Steam, with 58% of ratings listed as positive. Bob's Tall Tales is in much the same boat. 54% of those ratings are positive, with many of the reviews stating that even with the DLC purchased and installed, players are still denied access to the content. DLC for an early access game is nothing new, especially for ARK, but when you're having issues just getting it to work, yeah, that's not a good look. Okay, now on to the big ARK topic for today, Snail Games and those financials I have been eagerly awaiting for months to finally arrive. They have. And, you know, in my previous ARK uploads, I made some pretty bold predictions, and I was called out for those posts, but after looking these over, for the most part, I was spot on. Now, as I said earlier, this year-end financial report is 110 pages in length, and I will leave a link to it in the video description in case you want to delve into the insanity for yourselves. But if you dig around enough, there's some really juicy information buried throughout the pages. According to Snail, Survival Ascended sold 1.6 million units leading up to the end of December 2023, with Steam alone accounting for more than 600,000 of those in the first 2 weeks of launch. Despite those increased sales, Snail made roughly $14 million less in revenue for 2023 versus 2022 and totaled a net loss of $9.1 million for all of 2023, despite registering a net bookings of $85.7 million for the year. Now, I know this can overall get boring, but the TLDR here is that Snail sold more games and made more money for those sales and still registered a near $10 million loss for the year. There's also this pretty funny item here where they state they spent $900,000 on advertising, and I received messages from community members laughing about how Snail had just spent $900K on ARK advertising, which is actually completely wrong. You have to read the entire financials here to see their true numbers, but they spent $1.6 million for all of 2023 in advertising, which is up an additional $900,000 from their normal spend rate. And wait for it, that's for all their games. So they spent $1.6 million in advertising, including ARK advertising, which explains a whole hell of a lot. Snail also seems to think their unrestricted cash of $15.2 million is enough to keep the whole operation running smoothly for 2024, and knowing what we know about Snail and their inability to effectively manage money, I'm going to call a toss-up on that statement. Now on to some really interesting numbers buried in this statement, and it doesn't matter if you're a casual or seasoned ARK survivor, this is your game kind of spelled out in X's and O's. Snail has deferred nearly $22 million in income for ARK DLCs, which takes me to Bob's Tall Tales and a possible deal to receive future income from a platform and or platforms, possibly on Game Pass or PlayStation Plus, or both. ARK continues to fund everything at Snail, as in the aggregate, it accounts for 91.9% of their entire net revenues, so as ARK goes, so does Snail. Now, I found this next one pretty interesting. Snail addressed consumer expectations, bugs, and their products not functioning as advertised, which is a known quantity. They also still owe quite a bit of money to previous loans and investors through the form of convertible notes that are all or mostly coming due in 2024, and we are talking millions of dollars here. Since they were slapped with compliance issues with the SEC concerning their reporting methods, namely not reporting accurately, they posted this huge area of text acknowledging their weaknesses, even going so far as to state that their financial reporting was not effective as of December 31st. So this is quite recent. And now on to some interesting breakdowns by platform. For 2023, 43.7% of all revenue derived from consoles, 43.4% from PC, and just 9.6% from mobile. And units sold went up by about 500,000 from 2022 to 2023. So not that much overall gain there. And by platform for 2023, and they don't list these by name, so I'm just kind of using my best educated guesses here, but PC seems to be at $25.7 million. PlayStation and Xbox are at $12.2 and $11.1 million, with Switch sitting at $3.3 million, assuming I'm looking at this correctly. And this is, again, by dollars, which would correlate with their one-to-one PC versus console statements. Again, if you take anything away from all of this information, it is that Snail is dependent on ARK almost entirely. They have some sort of deferred income predicted for ARK DLC not reported here in the financials. They also still owe a fair bit of money. Their income is nearly split evenly between PC and console game sales, and despite Survival Ascended dropping in Q4 of 2023, so it is included in many of these numbers, they made less overall for 2023 than they did for 2022. Okay, hopefully you made it this far into the video, and I know sometimes the technical jargon of these financial statements can get overly boring, but once you get outside of the corporate hype splashes and start investigating the X's and O's, you start to get a real clear picture for how things are going behind closed doors. Now, this next little bit, buried here in the financials, really shook me, and if you aren't paying attention, you need to right now, because this relates to Survival Ascended and ARK 2, and this is one of the very few mentions buried in these 110 pages of ARK 2. Now, leading up to this, Snail explains that they make licensing payments every month to SDE, which is the parent company for Studio Wildcard. Now, these are based on DLCs, and of course they relate to licensing, and there are tons of explanations and details listed everywhere in this section of the financials. But then I stumbled into ARK Survival Ascended and ARK 2 along with this exact statement. Quote, "Following the launch date of ARK Survival Ascended, which has already passed, we, Snail Games, will pay a monthly license fee of $2 million, I'm assuming in this case to SDE, which, listen to this, will be terminated upon the public release of ARK 2. Let me say that one more time because this is coming directly from them, and I'm going to break this down in a different manner. Right now, Snail Games is paying to SDE a monthly fee of $2 million for the licensing of ARK Survival Ascended, which, the very moment that ARK 2 goes live, will be terminated. Now, I know it's a pretty heavy statement to be making, and I'm going to give you a second to digest it for yourselves and read it up on screen, but there is paragraph upon paragraph listed out in these financials in granular detail, listing out every last bit of their licensing agreements. The fact that the ASE license runs up through 2035 and will then renew every 3 years from there, and how much they pay monthly for those licensings and for each individual DLC delivery. But to see that exact statement made in their own words, we will pay $2 million monthly for ARK Survival Ascended until ARK 2 launches, at which point that payment will terminate, makes me think of all the possibilities that ASA being in early access means that they, Snail, can legally pull the plug on this entire project at any time, and seeing the monthly payments are going to stop once ARK 2 launches, with no mention of continued licensing, with no mention of a suitable alternative, there's no statements to the effect of future licensing agreements will be negotiated upon release, well, we could have now just seen in their own financials confirmation that Snail is using ARK Survival Ascended as nothing but a stopgap, a financial means to the end, which is ARK 2, and Survival Ascended will be cast out the very moment that ARK 2 launches. Again, I'm just taking a look at what I see here in the financials, not my wording, but it really sticks out from the rest of their licensing and payment verbiage. Leave me some feedback on anything ARK related and I will do my best to respond. Remember to hit subscribe and ring that notifications bell to receive my future upload alerts. All my socials can be found in the video description. Thank you so much to the nearly 215,000 of you that have taken the plunge, and I'm going to continue to bring you unfiltered ARK content as long as you enjoy it. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.